of YouTube. It's Multiplier with a Serum tutorial again, because Serum is dope. I'm absolutely in love with this thing. And it's all about how to make a vinyl sub, because basically I'm using some non-standard ideas in this preset, and I think they're really cool. I think you're gonna love it. Some cool stuff. I think you may have remembered I did a video a while ago on how to make Serum sound analog. Well, that was quite a simple idea. So imagine taking that idea and then taking it way further and doing some super cool advanced tings. So yeah, you know, you've normally got a sub bass, it's just a clean, simple sine wave. You may warm it up a bit with a bit of saturation, adding in some extra harmonics, but it's normally quite a simple thing. What I've done is try to take it to the next level and add a bit more character. So just like how you maybe sampled a sub bass line from a vinyl record, there'll be all sorts of weird imperfection that would give it some character, and that's what we've hopefully done in this preset. So let's give you some examples, and then I'll break down the key ideas behind the preset. So it's a high note. Try and hear the imperfection, the pitch drift, the crackle, the buzz, the noise. If I turn up the crackle, you'll hear the crackle a bit more. That's one of my favorite bits of this. Hear that crackle? How cool is that? Definitely better subtle in the mix, but you can definitely hear it if I turn it up. Maybe turn down the buzz a bit. Cool, satisfied, pretty cool, right? What did I do to make this? Well, there's quite a few cool ideas floating about in this preset. So let's start off with the modulation side of things, because it's an easy one to look at and it affects everything else. So we have quite a lot of stuff being modulated, and we'll cover that later on. But in terms of how I'm doing the modulation, it all happens through the use of the Chaos Oscillator. So if you go to the mod matrix here, I'm going to assume you know how Serum works because this is an advanced video. You've got you see here, basically everything is being modulated by the Chaos 1 oscillator. Now some of these are being modulated by the macros, which are essentially amount control, so they're not really doing much more than an amount parameter, but most of the modulation is happening with these Chaos, or this single Chaos 1 oscillator. It's a free running oscillator sort of thing. So in particular, if you have a look, as I hold down a note, let's look at, say, this one. Look at that little dot, and notice how as I hold hold a button down here, notice as it moves about, it's moving about chaotically in an unpredictable way. That gives it quite a lot of character. See how it's moving about? And notice how, although on that particular modulation setup for that particular bit, it's moving about quite a bit. Some of the other ones, it's moving about a lot less, but it's all fundamentally moving about in a chaotic way. And that's the whole point of this, is I wanted the modulation to feel alive and random, not some kind of rhythmic or stepped. I didn't want anything predictable. I wanted it to be kind of random. So we basically used the Chaos Oscillator for everything, it looks like, which is pretty cool. So yeah, everything I talk about that's being modulated is being modulated by the Chaos Oscillator. That's one of the first things to get into your brains. Right, cool. That was pretty cool, but some of you already knew that. If you watched my video on how to make Serum sound analog, you may have already seen the fact that we can use a Chaos Oscillator to make things move about chaotically. It's worth noting, if you haven't seen it before, that the only way you can set this up is by hopping into the mod matrix and choosing it as a source. You can't drag and drop the modulation around like you can with an LFO or an envelope. So yeah, you have to use the mod matrix, but that's cool. You can do that. You're not afraid of matrices. That's the plural of matrix. You're not afraid of matrices, so a mod matrix doesn't freak you out, so you can use it. That's cool. Right, let's get into some of the more interesting things that I've done to make this sound vinylly, because I've done some cool stuff. Right, so what things have I done? Well, the simplest thing to wrap your head around is the fact I've added in a bit of background noise. So we have this noise oscillator here, which if I turn it off, you can hear. And you basically just choose whatever sample of noise sounds cool. I thought J60, whatever that is, sounded pretty cool. So I chose that as a noise sample, did a bit of modulation. You can see if we look at the pitch here, that's moving about. So it's moving the noise about in pitch in a really subtle way. You can see it's barely moving. You've got the level moving a little bit, again being modulated by the Chaos Oscillator. You have another cool one is the phase is being moved about, and the phase in the noise oscillator is the start position on the sample. So effectively, if you're playing through a sample over and over again and you keep moving the start position, that has the effect of like scratching a vinyl record. So it just gives the noise a bit more bit more random movement than it would otherwise have. So it's quite cool. It's definitely subtle. You have to listen quite carefully to hear the modulation in the noise. But because we have programmed in quite a bit of modulation, it takes the noise from being just really consistent and really flat, just brings it to life a little bit. Remember, subtlety is the key in this sort of sound. We don't want the noise to be distracting or to sound like noise. We just want it to be felt as a bit of the sound, basically. Yeah, so that's the noise. That's quite easy to wrap your head around. We also have oscillator B. So oscillator A is doing your main bit of the sound. That's quite easy to see. And that is a simple sine wave. In fact, it's an analogy wavetable. It's an analogy sine thing. So it's a slightly more interesting sine wave with a bit more harmonic stuff happening. And we also have the wavetable position. You can see being modulated by the chaos oscillator. You see it's moving around the little blue dot. And we also have a bit of bend plus warping happening, which is bending the wavetable back and forth. So it's just giving that wavetable a little bit of movement, bringing it to life a bit, taking it from a consistent straight sound and just, yeah, bringing it to life basically. Just pretty cool. And then we have oscillator B. I'm going to show you the coolest bit last because that's the kind of guy I am. So we have oscillator B, which is giving you that buzz sort of sound. If I turn off, say, these two. It's basically just a bit of this wavetable that I found that sounded quite buzzy, so it's just a little bit of an extra something. Pretty simple. We have the chaos oscillator modulating the level. So you can see this level is moving about a little bit. So notice how I've modulated quite a lot of this chaos oscillator, so lots of bits feel more alive, because you want to take this stationary flat thing and try and just make it a bit more interesting, basically. It's pretty cool. And then what I thought is one of the more interesting, non-trivial things I did in this preset to make it vinylly is add a little bit of that crackle. So notice how, if I turn up the crackle, you should definitely be able to hear it. Hearing the crackle in the sides. And that's quite a fiddly thing to try and program into the preset when you think about it, because how would you get that crackly sort of thing from a synth like this? And basically what I did is I figured out if you use, I should have done this first, this is probably my favorite bit of the whole preset in terms of non-obvious stuff. I used this filter here, sample hold minus, to do a bit of it. And to best demonstrate how this works, if I crank up the mix, so at the moment you can see as I'm holding down a note, see how the mix is barely there? It's only a few percent or so. And that's with the crackle turned right up. It's only a few percent. If it's down to a more reasonable level, it's barely a percent or two. So what, in fact, you can do, if I just crank this to show you. So this is what the filter actually sounds like if you just had the mix really, really high. And you can see if you say move the cutoff, kind of moves about, goes all nuts. So I basically figured out there was a particular point in this filter that gave me that sort of effect I wanted, which was roughly around here. But then just by easing back on the mix quite a lot, it becomes this real subtle crackle. Pretty cool, right? And you can ease into it with this macro. And then to get it on the side, because notice how that crackle's at the side. I suppose technically crackle shouldn't necessarily be on the side or the center, I don't really know. But to get it on the side, I move the pan, basically the filter offset, the stereo filter offset, slightly to the right, which basically gives the left speaker or the left ear, the left whatever, left channel, a different cutoff position to the right channel. So you have a different cutoff position for the left versus the right, determined by how far this is to the right. And that spreads it out to the sides, basically. Pretty cool, right? And yeah, that's pretty much it, to be honest. And then in terms of the other stuff I set up, I also modulated the overall, or basically the pitch of the main oscillator, oscillator A. You can see it's been modulated by Chaos Oscillator as well. So we can see if we go to the matrix, we have Chaos 1 is modulating the fine control of the pitch. So basically the pitch of oscillator A is moving about a little bit according to Chaos 1 Oscillator. And as a nice little note, the way you map a macro control as an amount is by using it as an auxiliary source. So you can see here Chaos 1 as a mod source is modulating the pitch or the frequency of oscillator A. So it says A fine. And then because we have macro 4 as an auxiliary source, that makes macro 4 effectively an amount for that modulation. I think I did that further. No, I undid it for macro 4. I mapped the other macros just manually. So macro 1 to the noise level, macro 2 to the level of oscillator B, and macro 3 to the mix for the filter. And yeah, that's basically how I did it. Pretty cool, right? Yeah, that's how you do a vinyl sub in Serum. And yeah, hopefully that's given you some inspiration, some ideas. Do it yourself or don't. It's up to you. Yeah, been Multiplier. Hope you enjoyed.